Hello, I'm Paul Naylor, Communications Director for the Alliance of British Drivers, and welcome to the first episode of Full Throttle of 2026 here on Unprecedented TV, brought to you in association with the Alliance of British Drivers. If it's not too late to say so, Happy New Year. Full Throttle is the show that gets under the hood, or the bonnet for us Brits, of the issues that affect everyone, but British road users in general and drivers in particular. This week, we're joined by the acclaimed US podcaster on environment, climate science, energy and resource issues, Tom Nelson.
And I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers, or ABD as we usually shorten it to. As Paul just indicated, this week we're joined by acclaimed US podcaster on climate science, energy and resource issues, Tom Nelson. Tom has interviewed many of those I consider to be luminaries of climate science and energy generation realism over a significant series of podcasts. Some of them, like Catherine Porter, we've also hosted here on Full Throttle. Today with Tom, we're going to review where we think we are with climate and energy issues either side of the Atlantic. So buckle up, this is Full Throttle.
And here he is. Hello, Tom.
Welcome, Tom.
Hello.
Very warm welcome to Full Throttle. Glad you could join us.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, pleasure.
Great to see you. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into podcasting on the environment, climate and energy issues, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really long story that started with this Ivory-billed Woodpecker thing back 20 plus years ago, where it was announced that they had rediscovered this extinct woodpecker. And the whole thing was a total crock, even though they had a peer-reviewed paper and tons of publicity, and they didn't see it. It was amazing. One major piece of evidence they had was a 6-pixel picture of this ivory-bill. 2 blacks, 2 whites, 2 blacks. Pixels.
That was it.
It was serious. That was supposed to be evidence. And I pointed out that you could look at my background anywhere. You can find 6 pixels all over the place. It makes no sense. So I got started right there, because before that I was kind of believing that if it was peer-reviewed science, then it must be true because people were interested. Yeah. But at that time, somebody wrote to me and said, Tom, you should check also into the climate thing, because it's the same deal where there's no evidence to back up any sort of climate crisis. And then within about a day of checking into that for myself, I found out it's true, that every single alarming thing they say, every alarming thing is baloney, all of it. So I started blogging, and I was on Twitter, and I started doing Twitter Spaces. And then in 22, I started doing podcasting, and I've done I've done a little over 360 podcasts. And very interesting.
And you've interviewed a lot of interesting people like Dick Lindzen. I'm not sure you've done Tom Coonan, or there's a whole panoply of climate realist Coonan, Steve Coonan, and others who are basically, and Chris Wright, your energy secretary, who really understand energy well and understand the complete ludicrous nature of the theory that's supposed to underpin the crisis.
So I didn't have Chris Wright on yet. I want to.
Okay. Well, yeah, but he's doing a good job without any prompt interview. He's
doing fantastic. He's telling it like it is. He's not mincing his words, and I love that. There's much more of that now, where people are speaking clearly.
Yeah, the time for mincing our words with these people is long past. We just need to take them head on and take them out, basically, in a conceptual sense, not in the practical sense, the FBI kind of sense.
The thoughts of Brian Gregory aren't necessarily those of Paul Naylor. There you go.
Maybe my expression was a bit inappropriate there. Anyway. I think what I tried to put together a sort of slide pack of what the climate thing's all around. And I mean, my background originally was I was in the chemical industry for over 30 years working in titanium pigments, which is a huge user of energy. And when all this stuff started coming out about carbon dioxide being bad for the environment, I started digging into it because I couldn't see the sense of it, not least because man-made emissions are such a small proportion of the total. Nature's massive. There's, I don't know, it's more than that. It's about 900 gigatons or so of natural emissions. There's only about 40 of man-made emissions. They totally overwhelm even if we stop producing any carbon dioxide artificially tomorrow, it wouldn't make any difference to the climate because so much of it's produced by nature and we have no control. Anyway, let's dive into the slide pack. Charlotte, can you put up the first of the slides? I mean, this was when I started looking at it, this thing immediately I smelled a rat, because you can see this shows the temperature, which is in blue, carbon dioxide levels, which are in purple. And you can see the trend from sort of nearly 600 million years ago is the carbon dioxide levels are sliding downwards over time. And we're at record really low levels of carbon dioxide compared with the geological past. And you can also see that the carbon dioxide levels and temperatures vary all over the place and often not in the same direction. And the big thing is we sort of saw the most recent peak was about 150 million years ago in the Mesozoic age. And since then, carbon dioxide has actually been declining towards zero. Fortunately, not to zero, but towards it. And that's because about 150 million years ago, animal life, particularly oceanic life, started sequestering carbon dioxide to produce shells to protect them. And when the animals die, the skeletons sink to the bottom of the ocean, and the gravitational pressure down at very, very deep depths compresses them into carboniferous rock. So the result is then they're not available at all for any sort of biological process and can't be released back into the atmosphere unless we start digging them out of the ground and calcining them to put it back in, which we might be reduced to doing at some point. Anyway, so that was the first thing. Well, there's no correlation there. There's no way that carbon dioxide can drive the temperature. And anyway, from my science background, Henry's law basically says that the partition coefficient of carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and the oceans is about 1 to 50. So there's about 50 times more carbon dioxide in the oceans than there is in the atmosphere. And there's it's a sort of a steady state thing at any one time. But when the ecosystem starts sucking carbon dioxide out of the oceans, well, also because they're in steady state, it also sucks carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And you can see it's a long process from that Mesozoic period down to where we are now. And the fact that we've slightly increased carbon dioxide is great news, actually, because if you get below about 170 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, plant growth just ceases. And if there's no plants, there's nothing for animals to eat and nothing for carnivores to eat, including plants and animals, because we eat both. So we'd all be dead. So anybody who suggests carbon dioxide is a pollutant is completely out of his tree or her tree.
So, one thing I wanted to say is just looking at this purple line, the whole idea that we should spend $50 trillion trying to change the trajectory of that line is completely insane. And for most of the last 600 million years, there was way more CO2 in the air. So you hear people saying, oh, no, the air is filling up with CO2. People say stuff like that, but it's absolutely not. It's just a tiny little bit. And supposedly humans have added one more CO2 molecule for every 10,000 atmospheric molecules. The whole idea this is the biggest crisis in human history. It's a total crock. It's just amazing that
I think the American phrase, I'll paraphrase this, is a receptacle of excrement.
One interesting thing that Patrick Moore says, I think he said this on my podcast, is that if humans are raising that purple line up a little bit, that maybe we're saving life on Earth, because it was trending down to be so low that plants couldn't grow, as you mentioned. It's clearly that any CO2 we put into the atmosphere has been a net positive for life on Earth. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a gas of life, as Patrick Moore says. I mean, I've got his book, the one on imagining catastrophes and all the rest of it. I can't bring the title to mind at the minute.
I have it. It's fake invisible catastrophes.
That's it. And threats of doom.
Yes. Yep.
We're all doomed, as we used to have a program on with a guy called Fraser in Dad's Army, and that was what he said all the time. Anyway, so that was the first sort of thing that immediately I thought, well, there's a hair away here. This doesn't stack up. The science isn't sound. And if we go on to the next slide, Charlotte, please.
Can I bring up one point there? I just throw in one more thing, is that when people are trying to make plants grow in greenhouses, they spend good money to raise that number up to more like 1,200, about 3 times as much. Because it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come on to later. There's been an effect in the terrestrial amount of plant growth because of the small amount of extra CO2 in recent years, which has increased the amount of greening, made plant growth more efficient, and water loss is reduced. So, there's what's to not like about carbon dioxide, and therefore what's to not like about burning hydrocarbons? Because the product from burning hydrocarbons is carbon dioxide. And the more we have in the atmosphere within reason, the better. So anyway, this second slide, basically, this is a recent paper by Nelson that I picked up on the last few days. And they basically have taken that 600 million year period. And again, you can see the carbon dioxide profile again, but the interesting thing is they've sort of tried to drill down and look at how the temperatures have gone, and you can see there's one period where the carbon dioxide level stays the same, but the temperature's been seesawing up and down like a sawtooth pattern, and not sufficiently to drive major changes in carbon dioxide, or maybe the resolution isn't so good, but basically the correlation is poor. Over short periods, you can see, because of Henry's law, that the carbon dioxide level can go in the same direction as the temperature, but it doesn't always. And in general, it lags. So if we go on to the next slide, Charlotte, please. And this shows exactly that when you actually look over, say, the past 400,000 years, the temperature always changes before the level of carbon dioxide does. So, the IPC have got the cart dragging the horse. So, you can see clearly from that, the blue line is the temperature and the red dots are the carbon dioxide levels. So it makes much easier to see that it's the temperature that makes the move first, and then the carbon dioxide follows because of Henry's law. Okay, so we talked a little bit, if we move on to the next slide, we talked a little bit about how much CO2 there is in the atmosphere and how much of it is man-made. Well, the left-hand block is the atmosphere in conceptual sense. The small block on the top right-hand corner is greenhouse gases, of which water vapor is the predominant one. It's responsible for anywhere between 75 and 90% of the greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide is responsible for the rest, but we only produce about 3.5% of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, and the rest is natural. So, as you say, tinkering about with our emissions, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference.
One fun thing about this diagram is that there's way more argon in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide.
It's an inert gas, and there's a lot more of it, as you say, than there is of carbon dioxide. But because obviously the climate lobby can't sort of scaremonger on argon because it's essentially a noble gas, it's inert, they've picked on carbon dioxide because all of human development in the last probably 150 years has been based on hydrocarbon combustion, one way or another. And the easiest way to control people is to invent some crisis so that we have to control carbon dioxide, because you're then ultimately controlling industrial development and energy generation. It just, the thing doesn't stack up. If we go on to the next slide, we go into the actual physics of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's a logarithmically declining curve. The first 20 ppm or so of carbon dioxide contributes almost all the warming. Any more you add, it has a diminishing effect with increasing concentration. So we're at the stage now where we're at 420 ppm or thereabouts, and to get another half to quarter of a degree, because that seems to be what the clever science is saying now. If I backtrack a bit, IPCC said at one point that the equilibrium equilibrium climate sensitivity, which is what happens if you double CO2. They had started off reckoning it was about 6 degrees per doubling of CO2. Now the estimate's down to between 1/4 and 1/2 degree for every doubling. And so, in other words, to get an extra sort of 1/4 to 1/2 degree, you have to increase the atmospheric carbon dioxide to 840 parts per million, or roughly. And to get another increment of 1/2 to 1/4 degree, you've got to increase it then to 1,680 and so on. So, those sort of numbers are not achievable anymore because too much of the carbon dioxide in the ecosystem is locked up in the bottom of the oceans. We can't access it. At some point, if we don't keep topping it up, we may need to start actually digging carbon dioxide rock out of the ground, calcium carbonate out of the ground and calcining it to put more carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere. Or keep burning fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, because I object to the term fossil fuels. If I was to go into the Natural Science Museum in London and grind up a Tyrannosaurus Rex and try to set fire to it, I wouldn't get any sort of heat out of it until you get it up to the temperature in a crematorium. So, fossil fuels is a stupid name. Anyway, sorry.
I do think this whole climate sensitivity thing is kind of hilarious because, as you said, we've been told that the degrees of warming we get for doubling CO2, maybe it's 6 degrees centigrade. But then you hear people saying, did we say 6? Oh, maybe it's 1, or maybe it's 0.2.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
all over the board. Yeah. And so the whole idea that this is basic physics and we should, it's settled. It's not. Yeah.
No, well, and certainly I think you interviewed Will Happer.
Yep.
Yeah, well, the next slide is courtesy of Will Happer and Will Weingarten. And this is that Happer and Weingarten are brilliant. They actually did a detailed assessment of what the atmospheric absorption window is for all of the gases in the atmosphere. So they incrementally went through every single line of the spectrum and aggregated all of the gases of that wavelength or wave number, depending on how you want to put it, and worked out what an atmospheric profile looked like. And the purple curve, I don't know if you can, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, obviously, but the purple curve is a sort of perfect black reflector, Planck reflector, as it's called, obeying Planck's law. What happens when you put water into the atmosphere is you get the lower curve, which is the black, really wiggly one. If you didn't have any CO2, then that black curve would follow the green bit through the middle and then drop back down to the other absorption curve. So essentially, the effect of CO2 is captured by that big, deep dip around just after sort of 600 reciprocal centimeters, so thereabouts, 700 maybe, wherever it is. So if there was no carbon dioxide, then the world would be colder because there wouldn't be as much absorption. When you put the current levels of CO2 in, which is the continuation of the black line, you can see it causes a big dip. And as I said, the first 20 parts per million of it produce most of that. And if you double the carbon dioxide from current levels, and they did the maths to do that, what you get is the red line. And you can see the red line is virtually indistinguishable from the black line, the 400 parts per million level that we're currently at. So increasing it to 800 parts per million, it's going to have, as I said, damn near no effect. They reckoned it was about 3 watts per square meter out of 360 watts per square meter. It was less than 1%. And there's the far bigger effect from water vapor and clouds than anything CO2 can do. I mean, CO2 is important. It is a greenhouse gas. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not. I don't. We would say that it's not a Premier League gas. It's more like an English Football League gas. It's not the top level. It's a bit down from there. You'll have a similar thing with baseball, presumably, or American football. So anyway, I mean, because you've interviewed Will, I'm sure he talked you through this. Brilliant science.
By the way, I was just going to use that word. He is brilliant. He is humble and brilliant. Casual brilliance is some people describe him that way. I love the guy. But again, it's so crazy to think of spending $50 trillion to make the red line look like the blue line or look like the black line. Take the red line. It's almost in the same spot. So you change it like drive industry out of Britain to try to make those lines look the same. it's completely bonkers, of course.
Yeah. Well, the company I used to work for has a factory. It's only sort of 20 odd miles from where I live, and that factory has been taken over by the Chinese, who are pouring over it, no doubt extracting any technology and know-how that they can back to China. And I'm sure they will shut this plant down because the energy costs here are about 6 times what they are in China. Is it 4 or so, the ratio at the moment for US? And it's basically driving UK industry out of business, and the government is just sitting twiddling its thumbs instead of doing something about it.
Yeah, so there's so much wealth and so much power is riding on this scam.
Yeah.
So much.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the problem. That there's so much vested interest that is actually propping up the receptacle we mentioned earlier, because the science is absolutely dreadful.
Yeah.
So if we go on to the next slide, this is just the photosynthesis thing, which, it's so important. Plant life is so important for all of us, for all the species on the planet. Charlotte, if you can pull up the next sort of, there it is. It's there. No, sorry, that one. Yeah. But people just don't appreciate how important carbon dioxide is and the photosynthesis process for life on this planet. And if we try to completely eradicate carbon dioxide, which we won't be able to anyway, but to even try to do it is the height of folly and hubris. It's just mad. We rely on plants and plant growth for food and for food for animals, which we domesticate or eat or whatever. If we were to be able to shut off carbon dioxide production completely, we'd be dead very, very quickly. All the animal life, all the land-based life on the planet.
Yeah, so we are being manipulated by scammers here, because this is the real CO2 story here. It's invisible, it's colorless, it's beneficial, but they call it carbon pollution. They want you to think of black smoke. A lot of times in the propaganda, they'll show you black smoke and they'll say, we got to stop carbon pollution, but it's not. It's not pollution. And as we're sitting here exhaling, we're exhaling maybe 40,000 parts per million, about 100 times what's in the atmosphere.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, not a pollutant. Yep.
No, absolutely not. And just we were talking about global greening earlier. The next slide, please, Charlotte, shows exactly that, the extent to which the Earth has greened, and it shows you the change in leaf area even over the last sort of 30 years or so. Some areas like the Sahara, there's not very much happened at all, but in other areas there's been an increase in greening. You can see as the as the intensity of the greening goes up, they show in various areas on the global map, because of slightly higher carbon dioxide levels. So any more increases is beneficial, definitely not disadvantageous.
So there is this whole story that emitting CO2 is going to cause starvation because crop yields are going to go down. But that's absolutely not true. I think even Will Happer might have estimated that up to 20% of increase in global wheat yields might be due to the increased CO2, because it's great plant food. It's not the climate control now, but it's really good for plants. And of course, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the crop yields are going up, tons of reasons. But one of them is more CO2. Yeah, absolutely, because plants use water more efficiently when CO2 levels are higher. Yeah. We're not going to that, but let's actually look at. I mean, we in the US as well has followed a declining carbon dioxide emissions path, but UK has sort of trailblazed it. But look at this. I mean, you've got to be asking who in their right mind would be doing this, because our emissions have come down. You can see ours at the tiny little thin sort of blue, cyan, or whatever you call it, line, and then Europe has followed that track. America also has declined slightly, but then you look at the India, China, Asia. I mean, they're just going gangbusters, producing, and the Chinese have got, I think, another 200 or something power stations, coal-fired power stations, planned and are being built as we're even sitting speaking, and you can see their emissions are just going up like a rocket, and we're cutting them. And of course, their living standards and their energy consumption per capita are going up dramatically as well. And if there's any real indicator of
economic development, it's energy use per capita, and we in the US used to be at the top, and now we're sliding towards the bottom because of the use of reliably unreliable renewables. And the result is that our wealth per capita is declining dramatically compared with the emerging nations.
So one funny thing that I noticed when I look at this graph is Tom Friedman came out with this book in 2008, talking a lot about green China, about how China was going to lead the world in the fight against carbon dioxide, and let's follow their lead. And here's what happened since 2008. They're supposed to be leading, but they're leading in increasing CO₂, which is fine because it's good for us. But they're not fighting CO₂. They're not. No.
They're paying lip service to it because there is some increase in renewables there. But in relation to their total energy mix, renewables is a tiny proportion.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, whereas here we're going the opposite way. And we've got to the point where we've got so much solar and wind energy generation in the UK that most of the time the producers are being paid to curtail generation because we can't accept it on our grid. And then, of course, when we really need it, like at the moment, it's quite still, it's cold, there's very little sunlight, so solar and wind are producing 9/10 of naphthol. And they want us to produce more of this to make the grid even greener, so even more likely to fall over. I mean, Catherine Porter must have, taken you through this and basically explained that the more renewables you get, the less inertia you've got in your system, which means any small changes can just topple a whole lot over, like in Spain and Portugal. And yet our energy minister, Mr. Miliband, is committed to getting more and more renewables, and we already can't take full advantage of the renewables we've got. We'd be better reducing them down and increasing energy generation from combined cycle gas turbine and from nuclear, neither of which we're doing with any great enthusiasm.
Catherine Porter should be your next energy minister. I mean, she's fantastic. That would change so much. It's so critical to make sane energy decisions, and she would make those. But this whole idea of subsidizing people for turning off their wind turbines or whatever, it's just all part of a bigger picture, just looting the public treasury. All sorts of looting is going on. This is just one area, but it's a huge area.
I'm glad to see President Trump has pretty much had it with this approach, and he's very much turning down the wick on those particular projects in the United States with a vengeance.
I should just throw in here, I'm keeping a long-running thread on Twitter about this, about how the climate scam is dying around the world. I started it last April, and I don't know how many. It's got tens of posts out there, but all around the world, a little bit at a time, the thing is dying. It's absolutely dying. And of course, there's going to be pockets of insanity for a long time because a lot of people are all in on it. But it's dying, and the good guys are winning. It's happening. Yeah,
at last. Old Guterres can rant and rave about the oceans boiling, but I think he's been rumbled, I'm pleased to say.
Of course, the ridiculous thing about all this is that the renewables that we're using, the windmills and everything else, are being produced by coal-powered means over in China and other countries. So they're rubbing their hands together. They're getting the big contracts to produce these things. They're probably laughing as they're wrapping them in cling film and cardboard and sending them over here.
Exactly. And sending them by diesel freighter across the world.
Exactly. It's an absolute nonsense. If somebody had told me this was how the world was going to be 30 years ago, I'd have said, you're joking. No way. No, absolutely. It's almost like we've succumbed to guilt for all our achievements, and we're now giving and giving and giving to people that, when the shift of power, which is probably already well on the way, but when the shift of power finally comes to fruition, they're never going to want to do the same back for us. They're never.
No, absolutely not.
It will not become a competitive world. We will become effectively what the third world was 40, 50 years ago.
But I mean, if you look at the objectives of some of the people in the UN who are driving this, there's not Guterres, it was a woman. not Lagarde,
Figueres, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Figueres,
Christiana.
that's her. Yeah, her and another guy called Ottmeyer were basically saying that the objective of climate policy was not to actually change the climate, but to redistribute wealth and to bring down the free enterprise capitalism system. So they've got political objectives. That wasn't in the remit of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Control when it was set up. That was supposed to be just to monitor the human effects on climate and how we could mitigate them. But it's turned into a giant political power grab now, assisted by the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and all these other groups. They're all allied, and they're all looking to move. I have to say, there's a personal opinion. They're looking to move towards a world where we're all completely digitally controlled, using central bank digital currency, digital IDs, and a carbon allowance for each individual, and they will have the means to shut off your access to assets, as in money, if you exceed your allowance. That's the world they're aiming for, I think, and they need to be taken somewhere in a cool, dark room, a nice cold flannel over their foreheads, and lock the bloody door for eternity.
So I don't know if you saw this C40 cities document. There was this thing called C40 cities, and as of recently, this document was still online, and it was so incredibly crazy that we were not going to be allowed to fly. And it said we're going to be allowed 3 pieces of clothing, new clothing per year. That's it. No meat, no dairy. Completely crazy to prevent bad weather. Yeah.
And who is the chairman of C40 cities, Tom? Do you know?
Is it Bloomberg or not? Or
no,
he's in there? No,
Callan, the mayor of London.
Is it? Okay.
Is it?
Yeah. All of these policies. There's another document which they squirreled away. If you go on a website called UK Fires, UKFIRES, there's a document on there called Absolute Zero, and it gives a blueprint for how they're going to control emissions of carbon dioxide to reach net zero by 2050. And first thing was reduce road transport levels by 40% between now and 2050, right? All British airlines, domestic airlines, will be closed by 2050, right? There was
cruise ships.
Oh yes, cruise ships and commercial freight would all have to stop. So how as a net importer of materials, how the hell is our economy going to survive? And then the other thing, of course, is all the stuff about eating less meat and less dairy and eating more cockroaches and crickets and whatever else the lunatic lobby want to foist on us. And as I say, if you go on that site on ukfires.co.uk, I think it is, and look at this absolute zero, and there's this lovely chart that shows you how it's going to be done. But of course, it's not being passed by the electorate, and the electorate's not being allowed to express any opinion on this or on net zero or anything else. And the reckoning will come.
So these costs are just huge, enormous for the money and for convenience. Those are real. But then the benefits are we're supposed to have less bad weather. But I keep saying we could do all this stuff. We could go live in caves and never burn anything again, ever, all of us. And still there'd be no measurable weather or climate benefit. None, ever, from doing all of this. None.
Even the IPCC's own data shows that there's been no effect of increasing carbon dioxide on extreme weather, hurricanes, all the rest of it. This is the UK fires chart, Tom. So the road vehicles thing at the top, rail. That stays the same, of course, because rail's sort of a favoured partner of the environmentalists. No flying, so your sort of weekly holiday packages out the window. No commercial or leisure sea travel. Heating oil has supposed to be electric using heat pumps, which are apparently setting on fire in very cold weather at the moment because they don't work efficiently. They're actually very good at cooling things down, but crap at heating them up when they're cold. What else was that? And fossil fuels. Yeah, fossil fuel consumption has to go down to zero by 2050. But there might be possibly new sources of clean, like e-fuels and things like that. But of course, the other thing, there's no mention here of nuclear or anything like that. It's I cannot believe that. Well, I can actually, sorry, because the people in our universities now are being taught what to think and not how to think. So when I read chemistry at Oxford, you were given problems and say, go away and solve them. Think how to get out of this problem. But these guys are told, this is the way we want to go. So make the model fit, bend and twist the science to fit what we want to do. But electorally, this is suicidal. Any party that admits that they're going to do the stuff that's on the screen they'll be, bums will be out the windy, as the Scottish say, pretty damn quick. But this is all going on in the background. It's not brought into the public domain, of course.
Yeah, so this whole idea that all flying and shipping ends in the 2030s or before 2050 anyway, it all ends.
Yeah,
and then that whole food thing, just in the 2020s, national consumption of beef and lamb drops by 50%. So I'm often debating climate cultists and scammers online, and they're saying, oh, no one's coming for your hamburgers. But here it is. It's in writing. They're coming for our hamburgers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, the whole thing, when you stack it up, then the final one is, of course, I was talking about the carbon cycle, and we'll just flash this up, please, Charlotte. It's the last slide. You can see that 96.5% of carbon dioxide comes from natural sources, about 3.5% from man-made. So how do we expect to make any major impact on the climate by tinkering? It's a bit like sort of trying to change the direction of a super tanker by prodding it with a limp celery stick. It's not going to happen. We aren't in control here. Nature is in control.
Yeah, there's a great quote from the late, great Tim Ball from quite a while ago. He's passed away. He was fantastic. He said something like that trying to control the Earth's climate by tweaking CO2 is like trying to fix a car by changing the tightness of one lug nut on one of the tires.
Yeah.
It's not in control now.
He was brilliant. He was the guy who said that Michael Mann shouldn't be in Penn State. He should be in a state pen. And I thought that was an absolutely...
He was right. I agree.
Yeah. And of course, he's lost his tenure now, Mann, hasn't he, at last? His transgressions have started to catch up with him.
I hope so.
Yeah. Because we have a broadcaster called Mark Stein who got lost his job basically as a result of some broadcasts he's made, but also because Mann was pursuing him for huge amounts of money for defamation. And in the end, Mann's ended up on the wrong end of that. Now I think he owes about $1 million in legal fees and all sorts of stuff. Apart from having lost his tenure at Penn State.
Yeah,
tyrannis, as I think it was what Will Booth said it, unfortunately, about Abraham Lincoln. But as far as I'm concerned, it fits entirely for Michael Mann.
It does blow my mind that Michael Mann got away with straight up fraud for so long. But those days are ending now, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so really good. How are we doing for time?
Oh, we're good. We've got 38 minutes on the clock because that's what we've clocked up.
That's not too bad. So, I mean, I'll just throw it home now because that was just to sort of throw the thing home. How worried do you think? Let me check. Has the arrival of Trump and the change in sentiment about climate and energy and stuff affected the Democrats' position on this? Because they were very much gung-ho going down the same route as our government when Biden was in control. And there were, permitting regulations were put up so that basically anything that involved hydrocarbons had no chance of progressing, and wind turbines and solar arrays were being chucked up willy-nilly all over the place, just like they are still in Britain. That's moderating now, is it?
It is actually. Some sort of a policy document came out recently from the Democrats saying basically that this is so unpopular now that it's a vote loser, and let's not talk about it as much and not talk about it at all, because it is a huge vote loser. And I do think that's the way this whole thing is going to end globally, is that it's not that the people are going to come out. The Michael Mann's not going to say, oh, I'm sorry, it was all fraud. In general, people are just going to stop talking about it. And I'm seeing that. I'm looking at Google Trends to see if people are searching for climate crisis anymore. And they're not as much. So it's just going to fade away, and people are going to get interested in other stuff. And then a lot of people who were all in on it as of 2 years ago, in the future, they're going to be saying, I never really did believe in this scam. It was, I never believed in it. We're going to hear a lot of that. If they break it all.
Well, in effect, that was an admission from Gates, wasn't it? Really, that climate change is not an existential threat, which is stuff that Guterres and all these other crazies in the UN have been saying for ages. It's never been and never will be an existential threat.
Yeah, not at all. Of course. I mean, Richard Lindzen says all sorts of stuff along those lines about how it warms a lot between morning and 2 p.m. and then nobody dies. And just a natural variation in individual years in New York City. Some years a little warmer, some aren't. That swamps any CO2 effect. So life on Earth is it's not fragile. It's not like everything that any species are going to go extinct if the temperature fluctuates a little bit. Because they would have already been extinct because the temperature has fluctuated. So if they're still around, that proves that they can handle it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, the whole of, we've not been here for, as a sentient species for, a significant proportion, but not a very significant proportion, the last 4.5 billion years. But in the period we've been about and reasoning and thinking, we've been in the business of managing our interaction with the climate to adapt to how the climate changes. And that's what we should continue to do. I mean, even I think World Bank says that the cost of mitigating climate change is a lot less than the cost of trying to achieve net zero. I think their estimate was 1.7 trillion or something, I think, compared with the cost. I mean, even in the UK, the cost if we were to try and achieve net zero is apparently, the figures vary between net zero, what you reckon it's about 3 trillion, which is one year's GDP for us, roughly. But McKinsey, they said it could be as much as 15 trillion, the McKinsey consultancy. So, I mean, 15 trillion, even over 30 years, $500 million a year for 30 years. That's a huge, weight. It's roughly a sixth of our GDP being splashed away on net zero projects when we've got zero growth. Well, 0.1% or something. Whereas growth in the US is 4-point-something% now under Trump, 4.2, I think. So who's got it right?
But the whole idea of even achieving net zero is dumb because it's not an achievement. It's not something that we should try. If it costs 10 pounds to do it, we still shouldn't do it because it doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to throw in here is on my podcast, I've had such a great time interviewing or talking to people who are experts in their area, like Peter Ridd on the Great Barrier Reef.
On the
I've had him on a couple times. He's fantastic.
He
the
is,
whole idea that CO2 is killing off the reef, he says, of course it's not. The reef is doing great. It's been there forever. It's been there, not quite forever. It's been there a long time. It's not harming it. And I then had Susan Crockford on to talk about polar bears. Had her on a couple times. She's fantastic. The whole idea of CO2 is harming polar bears. It's not harming them at all. Not one single bit. And they've been around, a couple 100,000 years. They've lived through really warm times where there wasn't ice, and they've gotten through it all. They're doing fine. There's way more polar bears now than there was during the cold period in the 1970s.
I think in some places, I think that some have actually got to Iceland, and they're talking about culling them because they're becoming a threat to humans.
Yeah. And this whole idea that polar bears would like there to be 10 feet of ice in the Arctic and completely frozen over because that would be so great. There wouldn't be any food up there. They need some warmth so that there's some food. Yeah. And One fun thing is that the climate scammers have almost completely stopped talking about polar bears because kind of everybody's figured out that is a non-starter. That's good.
Well, some of the climate scammers have migrated to political arena, have they not? Like Greta Thunberg, as I call her. We had a Greta and snowplow up in the north of Scotland somewhere where they do get snow a lot in the winter, and they named it Greta Thunberg, which I thought was really good. But I mean, she's got larger political aims now. I'm not sure if they're successful, but she seems to be changing tack anyway.
I think it is a sign of the times that the media was all in on her, and she would speak, and there'd be 40 cameras or something on her, and hanging on her every word. And now she doesn't even care about it. She's not holding up her sign every Friday. For a while, she was holding up the sign and then taking a snapshot, and that was it. Then doing whatever else she was doing. Now she doesn't even bother to do that anymore. And then there was a new Greta. There was Sophia Kiani, who was Greta 2.0. And now she's moved on. She doesn't care about it either.
But she's grown up. She's finally grown up. Yeah, there you go.
It's interesting, though. The emphasis has changed. I mean, there's a young girl who was on the other side of the coin in Germany called Naomi Zeit.
Oh, yeah.
And Naomi has actually left Germany, and she's a US citizen now under the sort of relocation scheme that Trump has offered to oppressed minorities, because she sees herself as an oppressed minority. And of course, the EU has actually tried to outlaw AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, the centrist party, because this is the thing that really gets me about all this. The people who are expressing views in AfD are actually centrists. They're not far right. You know, they're middle of the road views, but because the political establishment has moved so far away from libertarianism and so far towards totalitarianism, they try to characterize it as a right-left thing. Well, you know, there's no difference, far right and far left. There's no difference for the people living under those kind of regimes. They're totalitarian. You've got no liberties. And I think it was actually an American female philosopher, Ayn Rand, and she basically said that there's no difference between Marxism and Nazism. They are two gangs fighting over the same turf, and they're statists, and they believe that the individual should be the rightless slave of the state. And that's what's driving the policies, I think, from the very top. And certainly we're a prime example, because you can see the amount of oppression that we've been subjected to.
We've got the oppressed majority in this country, haven't we?
Exactly, yeah.
So we've effectively gone to a three-party system, although I'd argue we've probably got a one-party system, because everybody is behind reform. Now, what does reform want to do? Scrap net zero. So what the Labour, who are in power and probably within 6 months of being in power, were well overtaken by the Reform Party. What do they decide to do? Oh, well, we're going to cancel any local elections because they don't want to lose power. We've gone from being a democracy to an autocracy.
Yes, very much so.
And the big issue here is that whenever Starmer stands up in Parliament, the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, although she has improved, I'll give her a juice. She seems a lot better than she was. The Conservative Party and the Labour Party are dwarfed by the backing for reform, and yet reform, who should be the natural opposition, have hardly got a voice. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Starmer recently said, and I apologise, this is UK politics, but he recently said he wouldn't lose any sleep if the Conservatives were to get back in power, but he would lose, he would be he'd become an insomniac if Reform got in, because they're right wing, so centrist in effect. He's a human rights lawyer who believes in the law, but doesn't actually believe in ethics and morality.
So just one kind of one unrelated thing I wanted to throw in here is that I've been a student of what's going on Twitter and on social media for a long time. And it's so heartwarming to me that there's been such a change in the zeitgeist out there that for a while it was hard to find people who were into the climate scam. And now Al Gore put up something about how we're all going to die or something, and there was almost no support. Just over and over, it was people saying, you're an idiot. There's no climate crisis. There's a huge change. There's so many people who are posting well-informed pushback, saying, here's a graph, and here's an article, and here's the real data. It's wonderful. This freedom on social media is huge, on Substack, on Twitter, etc. It really is a big deal. Yeah,
but I mean, of course, the problem we're facing now is that the UK is trying to shut down a lot of websites. I mean, even I can't access our website if I use my internet service provider. So I can get onto the website with my phone.
Yeah.
If I don't go through Wi-Fi, if I go through Wi-Fi, my service provider is operating internet content filtering, and I can't get onto our website.
Wait a minute, your own website is filtered?
Yeah, by requirement of the government, and loads of our supporters and whatnot can't get on it unless they just use a phone and go in, avoiding using Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is not a free democratic country anymore, unfortunately, at the moment.
Well, I guess people are getting thrown in jail for tweets. Is that a thing that's happening?
Absolutely, yeah.
That happened, yeah.
So people are being thrown in jail for hurty tweets, and murderers and rapists are being allowed out of jail because there's enough room for them.
Yeah.
Not the sign of a well-run or sane country, actually, I'm afraid. It pains me to say.
And as our producer points out, someone was arrested this week for feeding pigeons when they didn't even actually feed the pigeon anyway. But to be arrested for feeding pigeons is crazy. Wow. I tell you what, don't walk around with a Greg's sausage roll because you'll be
no, that's it.
The seagulls will have you.
There'd probably be a death sentence for dropping crumbs, but you just get a slap over the wrist for, major crime. No, it's absolutely, it's a topsy-turvy country we're living in at the minute, Tom, and there are a lot of people who are very, very unhappy and will eventually get to wreak vengeance politically.
Yeah,
because you can keep deferring elections for a while, but eventually you will pay the price with the electorate, and they don't forget.
And apparently, it's not illegal to do so. We found out the other night, didn't we?
I can't understand why we have an electoral commission that's supposed to control elections and whatnot. Yeah. Why they are not in a position to say to the government, "You have exceeded the deadline for this set of elections. Either let them go forward, or call a general election and let the electorate have their say on how you're governing the country."
I still think that there should be a snap general election because they basically got in on a manifesto that is nothing like what they're actually doing.
The problem was nobody knew what their manifesto was because they didn't answer any questions. It was like the Three Wise Monkeys, they said as much general and sort of inoffensive stuff as they could, and didn't actually put in the manifesto all of the hit list of things that we're going to do. And it has been a hit list, really.
I still find it hard to comprehend how so many people that were voting Conservatives would suddenly vote Labour. That's like somebody supporting Man City half their life and then going to Man United.
I think a lot of them just abstained. I think that was part of the problem because the turnout was very low, and actually the Labour Party only polled about 20% of the total electorate.
That's true. Yeah. Because
so many people didn't vote. That they got this overwhelming majority simply because other electors were so fed up with the whole political process that what's the point in voting? Because I can't tell any difference between the major parties. And in fact, there's one of our politicians, George Galloway, who said that there's no difference between the Conservatives and Labour Party. They're two cheeks of the same bottom. He didn't use the word bottom, but you can guess what it is. And that's the way it feels to us. The green blob is still there and still has a lot of power in the UK. And a lot of it is because the power is not wielded by the government, it's wielded by NGOs, non-governmental organisations, quangos, that are sort of notionally controlled by government, but actually they're totally independent and do what they want to do. Outside of whatever the government wants to do. And I think that's what the Tories found over 15 years, that they were banging their head against a stone wall. And whatever the next administration, if it is reform, has to come in, they have to basically do some pretty radical surgery at the top of our civil service and set a bonfire of these quangos that are screwing up our economy big style.
Right.
I think we've done an interesting run through what's going on, what we see about climate change and whatnot. I think at some point it'd be good if we could get you and Catherine on together. Would be good. We can do, because we've had Catherine Porter on ourselves as well. We can do every so often, jump it round and see who we can interview and what, because we find plenty to talk about as you can tell. It's been really good, Tom. I really enjoyed it. It's been refreshing and interesting.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. We will have you back on. Absolutely, we can guarantee you that.
Sounds great.
Okay.
I'll be here.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us.